So it was a level 2 attunement, an amazing woman. During the attunement, she had this incredibly powerful energetic movement. So the attunement basically is where the master teacher, you are actually invoking patterns energetically in the atmosphere around the person you're attuning, moving those patterns into their auric field. And she had a huge experience, and it takes a little while to bring them out of the attunement. And she was sort of sitting there, bending her arm up and down like this and looking incredulously at her arm. And I said to her, I said, what's going on with the arm? And she said, everyone, look at this. What's this? What can you see? And we went, oh, it's a straight arm. She said, I've never been able to straighten my arm since I was about 12. She was hit by a truck and the bone healed at an angle. And after the attunement and the movement of Reiki, the bone straightened.
Welcome to Don't Step on the Bluebells, the podcast where personal healing and transformation take center stage. I'm your host, Amanda Parker, and I'm a fellow seeker on the journey of personal growth. Join me as I delve into the stories of gifted healers, guides, and everyday people who have experienced remarkable transformations. Listen in as they share their practical wisdom to enrich your everyday life. And don't forget to hit subscribe and never miss a new episode. Welcome to today's episode of Don't Step on the Bluebells. I'm here with the remarkable Dani Van de Velde, who is someone that I have really admired for a long time, with the incredible work that she puts in the world as a meditation teacher, as a healer, as a mentor, as someone who is always reaching for this incredible creative energy and bringing a really spirited way of living into the world in a way that's super accessible. So it is really an honor for me to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Dani.
Oh, thanks, Amanda. It's so lovely to be here. What a great intro. I'm going to keep that recording.
Please do.
Thanks for having me on your great podcast. I've been tracking it since you started it, and I can see the following growing. You're getting amazing guests coming in. So it's a real delight for me to be here and to have a chat with you about the things we love.
That is definitely true. So you've been on my radar for quite a while thinking, okay, I want to bring Dani in. But as someone who has so many different gifts that you offer in the world, I was waiting to figure out what exactly is that right showcase moment that I can bring you onto the podcast for. So I am really excited because today we're going to be talking all about Reiki. And I know there's so many facets, not just to Reiki, but to the way that you uniquely practice this ancient tradition. And I am selfishly incredibly excited to ask you all of the questions that I have about it.
That's totally cool with me because I absolutely love talking about it. So ask me anything you want.
To start off, I would love for you to tell us, as though you're telling your 5-year-old self, what it is that you do in the world.
I think if I was to put an umbrella over my different expressions of offerings, it would be to enable people to live a spirited life. And that expresses in a number of different ways, and it also expresses in a number of different communities and demographics as well. So, at the very outset, and which was my primary offering when I moved from corporate life and into working with the energy arts, is I teach people how to meditate. And within meditation, there are various forms of meditation. There's breath work and contemplative meditation, somatic meditation, mindfulness meditation. And we really benefit now at this time to have access to a lot of different practices and fantastic masters and fantastic history as well of where meditation comes from and different origin cultures. So that's the outset, because in my understanding, I think if we want to move more into, when I say a spirited life, understanding this dimension of ourself and our consciousness, we need to be able to create some space between our awareness within and what we're able to observe and our interface with modern life, which, as we know, just is massively pulls our awareness and dissipates it. So meditation is the first thing. And also with my private clients as well, often people will come in and they're very strung out. There may be anxiety, there may be stress overload, there may be illness in the body. And very often part of the spirit homework, I call it, for them to do is to get a basic daily practice down, because it regulates the nervous system, it heals the body. And like I said, it creates this space. So we're better able to perceive the energy in our bodies. We're better able to perceive movement of energy around us. We can access our intuitive information a lot more readily, and we become better within our relational field. So meditation's one chunk. If you want to call it a chunk. I'm absolutely fascinated by the capability of the human mind and the operation of consciousness. And that fascination's been with me forever and has led me into a much deeper, much more profound exploration of the energy arts, including Reiki, which is what we're talking about. Also, I teach psychic development, and there's absolutely a correlation between running Reiki and the sharpening of the intuitive senses and being able to perceive psychic information. So what I call it is intuitive healing, which includes traditional Reiki, but also psychic reads. And then, as the human mind is, like, we never really arrive at our sort of points of discovery, since I'd say probably about 4 to 5 years ago, during my Reiki sessions, I started to have spontaneous information coming into my mind, which was relevant to the client, which I knew wasn't psychic. I knew it was coming from a different source. And that then started a fantastic journey into the world of psychic mediumship, which I now offer as well. And then around all of that, I guess my sort of practical offerings, I'm really big on de-woo-ifying this kind of work, and like you said, I think there is kind of like there's a soup out there of weird language, people perhaps presenting themselves as being gurus or masters, and it's very confusing, so I do produce a lot of content. And I'm very particular about my language and my presentation. So you'll never see me dancing around with an eagle feather in my hair and although I do that, but that's not the point. That's my personal sort of exploration and practice. I'm really big on just plain speak. I love empirical evidence. I love measurement. I love where the explorations in quantum science and the energy arts are starting to find synergies. I love neuroscience as well. So all of my teaching and my content has elements of that, because I've got a very interrogative mind. It's not easy for me just to swallow something blindly. I'm always saying, why is that? Why does that make me feel that way? I get a bit fanatical about a new practice, and I will keep doing it until I really fully understand it. So my content production, I've written a book. I'm writing 2 more currently. I've got my own podcast, as you know. I produce guided meditation and ritual tracks, which are on Insight Timer. And I'm also very big in forming spiritual communities where people feel like they belong and they feel like they've got permission and license to explore and ask questions and express this aspect of themselves in a way where they feel safe and where they can find some answers. So that's another aspect of what I do. And I absolutely love it, because I just see time and time again, and also in my own personal journey, how transformative it is when you give space in your life for your spirit. Like we're big on fitness. I know you are. You're a very healthy woman. I am too. Well, we may fall off the wagon every now and then, but
we do our best.
We do our best. We do our best. But mainstream understanding of diet and movement and preventative medicine and all that sort of stuff, like, people know that now. Whether you choose to engage with it or not is another thing. The mind-body connection, so the psychophysical connection, is now, I would say, largely understood. So the mindfulness-based stress reduction system of John Kabat-Zinn. We've got some fantastic cellular biologists, the fantastic Bruce Lipton. We've got guys like Dr. Joe Dispenza that are really bringing mainstream into predominantly the psychophysical connection, that the connection between how we think and how we respond to life, and the quality of our thoughts and the quality of the resonance of those thoughts and the impact that has on the body. But in my view, there's still it's spirituality, which is not necessarily religious spirituality, although there's amazing intelligence and techniques that come from the big world traditions, which we can access now, which is wonderful. But spirituality in terms of an essential aspect of the self, and also the causal aspect of the self, I think is the next frontier. And that's where I like to really focus my own personal exploration, and also all of my content and all of my teaching. I don't know. Was that succinct enough?
that was incredible, actually.
Okay,
I was just going to say, I want to take this and I want to feed this exactly into all of my marketing materials.
Awesome.
What you've just said.
Do it.
No, I mean, I find it really challenging, and it's probably just a barrier that I'm overcoming myself, to share with people the value of, as you call it, spirited living, which is a beautiful phrase that I'm giving you credit. I believe you have coined it.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So really giving people that opportunity to recognize it's not religion. It doesn't have to be even deep spirituality, but it's a belief that there's more, that I can engage with something more, that there's many opportunities to connect within. And as you said, the deeper that you go in these different practices, whether it's meditation or Reiki or different practices, then more and more stuff starts to enter your field of awareness.
Yep,
that you get to choose if you want to engage with it or not.
Absolutely. And I would add to that too, that certainly in my experience and what I can see with the people that I coach and my clients and my communities, is that when we cultivate and allow space in our lives for spirituality, what comes with that, aside from the wonderful healing and self-regulation and secondary intelligence and those sort of things that get cultivated by spiritual practice, is this fantastic, empowering realization that we have self-agency. And I think this is where the real transformation starts to take place. And having an inbuilt compass, which we all have, which is reliable and potentially more reliable than what our mundane senses and is bringing into our awareness. And so there's empowerment and self-agency that comes with spiritual inquiry, which I think is limited to an extent if we're just working with the body, if we're just working with the mental field, if we're just working with the emotional field. Although you could argue they're all actually elements of one consciousness, which is what I teach from the koshas, from yoga. But we've got this missing bit that I think is super exciting, and it does take us to a very different understanding of who and what we are, and what life is. And that to me is very exciting, and that heals and empowers.
And would you say that people enter this world of spirited living from any area of their life? Is it a certain age range or demographic, or are people coming from all over? Is there some kind of trend that you see about when people are going, okay, I'm ready to have a different kind of living?
For some people, it can be triggered by crisis. So they may be very ill, or they may lose their job, or their marriage may break up, or there may be a life crisis, which brings them to some kind of a realization that there's got to be a better way. But I didn't have a crisis. So my journey was, in shamanism, we talk about, there's the sort of two paths to kind of waking up. I don't like the terms awakening or enlightenment, because I think they've got this them and us, better than, worse than kind of inference in them. But I like the term unfoldment. That's a term we use in mediumship. And in shamanism, what we talk about is you either walk the path of the wounded healer, or you walk the ecstatic path. And certainly my path's been the ecstatic path. You know, like I'd never get sick. I've had a brilliant upbringing, a fantastic education, great careers, you know, like, so there wasn't a moment where I had a judder shock in my life and went, there's got to be a different way. For me, it was an unfoldment. But certainly people who come into my arena, it can be a life crisis. It can be a gentle, ecstatic path of unfoldment where there's just something there, you know. It can be as well, which I find interesting, much more spontaneous psychic experiences or mediumistic experiences, but they don't know what's going on because they don't have a frame of reference because it may not have been recognized in their family, or they don't have a set of friends they can talk about it with. That's happening more, which is interesting. But in terms of demographics, I would say I'm probably about 60% women, 40% men in my client base and communities. I live in Singapore, as you know. When I started out, I was almost 100% expats, but that has definitely shifted. I would say I'm 50-50, sort of local Southeast Asian clients and 50% expats from Western, you know, Caucasian extraction. I tend not to see very young children. I do get asked a lot, but I don't, because more and more when I'm doing energy healing and doing Reiki, a big component of that is really some coaching as well about perspective shifting, getting a daily practice in of even simple breath work. I guess in my demographic, they tend to be people who are already in some kind of spiritual inquiry. So unless they're coming in for a physical illness, and that's where it starts. In terms of trends, I would definitely say just more people. And I do think that's a combination of a number of things. I think there's way better content out there, like your podcast, for example, and your amazing guests that you speak to.
Naturally.
Naturally. And I think there are some amazing voices out there. Like I mentioned a few, but there are some really fantastic modern day mystics, I would call them, that are putting some vernacular and so some vocabulary around these experiences that people have and what's possible that perhaps we haven't had before. And then, of course, there's the post-COVID effect. So I think the COVID experience for all of us created health crises for a lot of us, and a lot of people are still dealing with those with long COVID. But in my view, I think it generated a big question mark in a lot of people's minds about the pharmaceutical model and about traditional Western medicine, and a curiosity and a reach for alternative methods of healing. And so it's not just the Reiki practitioners like me that are super busy, you know, but traditional Chinese medicine's very, very busy. A lot of the other energy modalities and of the healers that I'm networked with in body talk, for example, craniosacral, you know, these beautiful modalities, it's getting very, very busy. So I think there's a post-COVID effect to it as well. In addition to that, there's better and better empirical evidence that this stuff works. So that combined, I think, is seeing the rise of the energy arts and the energy healer at this time.
I will also plug your podcast for a moment because Dani has this incredible podcast called The Modern Crone, and she is speaking. Every season has a different topic, a different theme having to do with this spirited living. So, for example, there is one season on the energy arts, there's
Yep.
one season on mediumship, there's a season on creativity.
Yep.
And you can really listen to people who are engaging in those different areas every single day. It is phenomenal because
Thank
as you're
you.
speaking about these different energy arts and different healing abilities, I'm thinking of every episode of your podcast that I have listened to.
That's good. That makes
in
me happy.
complete awe.
There's some incredible guests on there, isn't there? Like, and the season on shamanism was great too. I'm doing a good one at the moment. I'm doing an exploration of love. And
Wow.
it's mind blowing. So I am speaking with psychologists and counselors, sex therapists, and also energy healers that tap the frequency of love to heal, and mediums as well. Does love prevail after death? And it's really changing my understanding of love. I don't think I've thought about love that much, so I've just sort of felt it, taken it for granted, expressed it. But so that's quite cool. But that's what's good about doing a podcast, isn't it? Is you get to talk to all these great people.
That's it. I said, I'm successful as long as I get to have these conversations.
Yeah.
If no one else listens, it's okay. If a
Yeah.
lot of people listen, great, because I'm just going to ask all the questions I'm really eager and anxious to know about.
Yeah, I think that's why Don't Step on the Bluebells is such an engaging listen, because you ask questions like, oh, that's what I would have asked. That's a good question, So, yeah, so thanks for the plug. Warmly received.
Yeah. Well, very happily. There's so much wisdom in just everything that you share. And I really love the super pragmatic approach. Just the way that you really, as you said earlier, de-wooify it all. Because I think a lot of people feel maybe they have that calling or that urge, but even for me, it was really important in designing this podcast that it's not in some feminine palette with like pale rose colors and pinks. And that's sort of what I see all over the place now. When people talk about spirituality, it's a lot of, people who have discovered one small element and it works for them, and they smack a bunch of feminine colors on it and put it out into the world. And you're really missing the opportunity to go wider and reach a lot more people who need that message.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you've heard me bang on about it before in my socials about this whole love and light crap, right? So,
but isn't it all love and light? I mean,
don't get me started. But that's just bypassing the game, and bypassing discomfort. And I think what comes with spiritual empowerment is an ability to change our perspectives on what we might have otherwise labeled as discomfort, challenge, even illness, and actually cooperate with it and work with it and transmute it that way. And so, yeah, you'll always see me bashing on about the love and lighters. I can't stand it.
I know for me, the way that my journey started was training as a coach and at the same time training as a Reiki healer.
Yep.
And actually that impulse came from our mutual friend, Jane, who said, Amanda, check this out. So I was traveling, I was in Thailand, and I met the woman who became my Reiki teacher, Emma McKendrick, and she's really phenomenal. And that was, I didn't know it at the time, but that was the beginning of waking up for me.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how to go deeper. I didn't know what it was. I knew there was all this energy and ideas, and honestly, the last 6 years have been that exploration. That is literally why I'm doing this now, because I think a lot of people just try to find a way in, but they don't know how.
Yeah.
And then there's that person on their feed who does, the tantra breath work or whatever, whatever it is. And that's maybe just the door opener for many people to start exploring.
Yeah, definitely. I think different people have different sort of entry points into the world of spirituality, and there are certainly many entry points out there. I do really encourage people to be very interrogative about it, and almost a little bit skeptical, to really trust their instinct on stuff and get referrals from other people. I mean, a lot of the energy arts are not regulated. And so you really do need to go by word of mouth, and you need to trust your instinct on different practitioners, because with energy work, you're exposed in a way energetically to the practitioner. And if there's some sketchy stuff in there, you can very easily be affected very negatively by that, and some of my work, I call them cleanup jobs. Where people will come in and they will have had an experience with a self-professed energy guru or something, and they're left in a mess. And that is a proportion of my work, people coming in, or they're given some strange theory about something, like you've got a demonic attachment or something, and it's put them in a huge spiral of fear. And the fear itself is then starting to manifest different things around them. And they're then in this terrible state, which has been just planted in their mind. And the mind, because it's so powerful and so creative, it creates these terrible negative experiences, which then they sort of take as confirmation that something really is wrong, you know. And I find that unconscionable behavior, you know, to peddle fear within a spiritual context. I do think, from my observation when I've spoken to certainly my teachers, the amazing mediums that I'm now connected with, Reiki does seem to be a pretty common entry point for people. Either they've gone to a great Reiki practitioner and they've had an experience of energy, or they've had like a serious big healing, or they're drawn to learn Reiki like you've been and me. And they've come to realize that it's way more than a healing modality. Like, it actually really changes your life, like it, because you're tapping a frequency, you know, which is quite universal. I mean, that's what Reiki means. The Japanese name Reiki, Rei is universal and Ki is Chi, or life force. So you're tapping a lifewood harmonizing universal power. And whether you're running it through your system for your clients, for healing work, or, you know, whether you just want to learn it or receive it from a good healer, it has a vast impact on your life beyond the mind, body, emotional energy system. It has an organizing principle to it, which you can see play out in your day to
What
day.
does that mean, an organizing principle?
So the way that I see it is that it's a harmonic pattern. That would be a good way to say it. And so when we're in a life situation where there's disharmony, or where there's dissonance, and you could argue that an illness is a dissonance in the body, dis-ease, you know, a feeling of non-ease. Um, what Reiki has the ability to do is bring harmony to dissonance. And that's why it's such an effective healing modality. And it's also why the practitioner doesn't necessarily need to know what the cause is of the dissonance. I like to know, and I think intuitively, because Reiki sharpens the intuitive senses, you can read what's going on as the Reiki's moving. But it's described in the writing as an osmotic force, so it's intelligent. So that's why a very common experience, which is what I experienced when I first had Reiki, and I'm sure you've had this too, is where the practitioner might have their hands actually literally touching your head, but you have a sensation of being touched at your stomach or being touched at your feet. And you can lie there and you can go, how are they doing that? Because it's a very, very palpable feeling. But it's because the Reiki is moving to the center that needs the harmonizing. And it's really just entering the system through the practitioner.
I've often heard it described as, yeah, like Reiki's an intelligent force.
Yep.
So it's really able to go where it needs to go.
Yep.
And I have a feeling by now people are sitting listening going, okay, what is Reiki?
Yeah.
So let's start with the baby steps now and
Yeah.
say, what actually is Reiki?
So, well, the name is a useful starting point to that. So, universal life force. If you can hold the perspective, which is provable through atomic science, that everything that we consider to be solid and perceivable in the natural universe is actually vibrating energy. And so you take an atom, you look at it under an atomic microscope, and there's nothing solid there. There's a nucleus and there's a vortex of spinning energy, and there's subatomic particles spinning all around it in a pattern. So if you say, okay, well then our mind, body, energy system, we'll talk about humans, but there's also animal Reiki and there's plant Reiki, there's all sorts of Reiki, but anything living basically is an organization of information in the form of vibrating energy. So if you think of yourself as that, and then what Reiki is I would say the essential force that keeps all those atoms spinning on their axes. It's life force. And the trajectory of life is to thrive and to evolve. And so if we are tapping Reiki, we're tapping the essential base vibration that enables the trajectory of life, which is to thrive, to be well, and to evolve or to unfold in our awareness and our consciousness. To sort of boil all that down, it's vital life force, it's life wood, it's harmonizing, it's intelligent, it definitely can be felt. So this is another thing that I will get in my room. So someone might come into the healing rooms and I always ask them, have you had Reiki before? Do you understand what you signed in for? And quite often I will hear, well, I had Reiki, but I didn't feel anything. But the Reiki practitioner said it was going in at a higher level of self. And I just call BS on that. Like, it's an energy art. So an energy we can perceive. Our body can perceive it. Our auric field can perceive it. Our mind can perceive it. We're surrounded by energy, and energy brings us to bear. The light, the colors that we see are all forms of energy. The sounds that we hear, sonic energy. The touch of someone who's soothing you if you're really sad, like someone who you trust, that you feel safe with when they touch you, that is emotional energy moving from them to you. The more psychically aware of us, we will pick up on, and all of us have had this spontaneously, where you think of someone and then you hear from them the next day. That's thought energy, that's mental energy, so we're participating in a amazing dance and symphony of all different forms of energy, but we just don't see it that way. And Reiki, I would say, is the essential, vital frequency of that energy.
It's fascinating because I've had the experience on, well, I guess many levels, right? And I think when people are first learning Reiki, you're taught, oh, okay, maybe they won't feel it, but you can guarantee people will just feel relaxed. So as like a newer Reiki practitioner, you will tell people, oh, you might not feel it, but you're going to just have a general sense of well-being and relaxation. And
Yeah,
I fully buy into that. And it's also, I've had the experience of Reiki where, oh my God, it was painful what
yeah,
was going on because you're
yeah,
really feeling things shifting within. And the experience of Reiki where I just fell asleep.
yeah,
I
yeah.
said, okay, I don't even know what's going on. And then as the recipient.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's partly got to do with the practitioner. So there are a lot of practitioners, and which is a really beautiful, really viable form of Reiki, where they offer Reiki, which is a bit like to relax and
Mhm.
to feel a bit of a lift. Okay, and that's cool. And Reiki will do that. So if it's coming through a practitioner and that's their frame, that's what
Mhm.
will be experienced. For me, I always want more. That relaxation's great. And for some people, like today was interesting. So I'm speaking to you after seeing 6 clients today. Every single one of them got knocked out like they were shot with a tranquilizer dart, because the Reiki knows that that's what they needed. They needed a very, very deep, immediate move into deep sleep. And as they sleep and they're snoring and all of that sort of thing, I can feel then, because their executive mind is out of the way, I can feel the Reiki moving very, very deeply into their system. So relaxation, stress relief, all of that kind of stuff it does. But I think if the practitioner is a bit of a psychonaut like you and I, it then opens the field for the Reiki actually to do a lot more. I've seen some amazing stuff in my healing rooms. I've seen bones straighten. I've seen incredible emotional release. I've seen lineage healing happening, which expresses in a spontaneous menstrual bleed for the client. You name it, I've seen it, right? So there's no limit to Reiki.
Bones straightening on the
Yeah,
table.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Could you tell us a bit more?
actually, I have to correct that. It wasn't actually on the table. It was in an attunement workshop. So this is another part of Reiki. So to work with Reiki, there is a process which we call attunement. And this is where you need to, well, I practice a Sui Reiki. So this is the most traditional form of Reiki. And there are other forms of Reiki like angelic Reiki and Tumo Reiki and heart Reiki, and they're called different things. But I'm a bit anal when it comes to my spiritual modalities, and I like to go to the original and possibly the most disciplined. And I go with it until I've got it. That's basically a Sui Reiki for me. And it's very precise and it's very, very disciplined. And I like that because it's a scaffolding that you can hold on to. But a part of the attunement process is when you want to become a Reiki practitioner. In the Usui system, there are 3 levels. And at each level, there's a different set of attunements which are given to you by a Reiki master teacher, which is the level that I'm at. And to become a Reiki master teacher, if you're following it traditionally, it takes years because you can't really understand and put to use and embody the attunements unless you're really running the Reiki and you're in a direct relationship with it as a form of intelligence. So it was a level 2 attunement, an amazing woman. During the attunement, she had this incredibly powerful energetic movement. So the attunement basically is where the master teacher there's a lot of teaching obviously, but then it looks a bit funny if I was to be filmed attuning someone, it looks very Doctor Strange. You are actually invoking patterns energetically in the atmosphere around the person you're attuning, and you're moving those patterns into their auric field. And she had a huge experience, and it takes a little while to bring them out of the attunement, which I do as a meditation teacher. I know how to do that. And she was sort of sitting there kind of like bending her arm up and down like this and looking incredulously at her arm. And I always like to get feedback because very often there can be some pretty big psychic experiences. There can be experiences of guides as well. So I like everyone to feedback. And I said to her, I said, what's going on with the arm? And she said, everyone, look at this. Look at this. What's this? What can you see? And we went, oh, it's a straight arm. She said, I've never been able to straighten my arm since I was about 12. She was hit by a truck and the bone healed at an angle.
Oh my God.
And after the attunement and the movement of Reiki, which does run through all the meridians, I can sort of see how that would happen. The bone straightened.
This alone, people, don't worry, I'm sharing her contact information later and in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is something, if I can say, I have not had that experience as a Reiki healer myself.
Yeah.
So I still have a bit of that doubt of like how much is really possible. So I listen and I know it and I believe it and it's true, and it's still up here because I haven't seen it myself with a client or someone that I'm working with.
Yeah, but I mean, you could argue, I'm sure you've seen some amazing emotional transmutation, right? So you might see, because you're a mind girl, right? So you might see people come in with neurodiversity or overwhelming anxiety or prolonged depression, that the meds aren't really working for them either. And you can see those kind of healings, which I think are just as miraculous as a bone straightening. Rather than the healing in the physicality, it's healing of the mind, So sometimes
I accept that. Thank you.
Yeah. No, don't discount it, and very often, I would say almost always, there's a correlation between the mind and the body and the emotional state and so on. So any kind of healing, I don't think you can rate it as one's better than the other. I mean, arguably they can be perceived as a bit more spectacular, but I do think it's definitely around what you believe is possible. Also, I think as a healer, it's around your direct relationship with the Reiki. I will say that to my students that come through for attunement. I'll say, you're not completing something here, you're actually initiating something. It's more like an initiation, I think. And your responsibility as a healer now is to start to cultivate a conscious relationship with the intelligent force of Reiki, and it will guide you. It will guide you. And it does. and you'd know this, I guess, you start sticking to your hand positions and you do it all to the book. But then there comes a point where you actually have a very strong intuitive prompt to create a pole of energy within the person's system, or you may feel it's time to move from the heart center down to the lower centers, but your hands won't move from the heart because the Reiki is still doing the job there, So with a sort of a conscious relationship with this force, you start to then really see what is possible. I had another amazing example that I give my students. Sometimes the body's healing response can be a little bit delayed. So I had this beautiful man who had this basically, like, he had a frozen esophagus and it caused all sorts of problems for him. So he was a wheeler dealer. He had to have a lot of lunches and dinners. It was very difficult for him to swallow. It was affecting his gut health. It was making him very stressed. He had all sorts of tried different treatments, and his throat just locked up, and it affected his ability to communicate, which was affecting everything. And he was a skeptic. I think his wife booked him in. I said, go and see this woman. I think I vaguely remember, it was a while ago, I vaguely remember the conversation going, do you know what you're here for? He goes, no, I just do what she says. And I said, okay. And I sort of explained what Reiki is. And I said, but the best thing to do is just experience it. And will I feel anything? You will feel a lot. So let's just get into it rather than me trying to give words to it. And he came out and he did feel very different. He said, wow, he said, I haven't felt this feeling of ease for some time. But it wasn't until the next day that I got this like amazed message from him. And he said that he was in the bathroom getting ready for work and he was looking at himself in the mirror and he had a glass of water there and he really wanted to gulp it down. And he was looking at it going, can I? And he said the way he described it is he said he could feel the lock of his esophagus open like an electric car window. It just went down, 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 down. And he gulped this glass of water, like the first glass of water he'd ever gulped. And it never came back. It never ceased again. And thankfully he was super popular and networked and all these people started coming through the door going, oh, I've spoken to so-and-so and he sent me here. So physical healing, as we're talking about that at the moment, sometimes it can happen spontaneously. Sometimes there's a sort of a lag effect because the body's a denser energy vibe. So the healing might take place energetically and mentally and emotionally. And then like a couple of weeks later, the body will catch up. That's very common. But also sometimes people need to actually change the habits and things that are causing the illness. And that's where the coaching comes in. So they will have a respite during and immediately after the session. But if they just go back to feeling angry or whatever the thing is which is causing the disquiet in their system, it's going to come back. And that's why I think the coaching is important.
Yeah, it's something that came up in a recent podcast episode was really about the integration.
Yeah.
Because in some cases, what you're describing really is there's healing
Yeah.
that happens in that moment. But often you also have to integrate what has shifted. Either that means creating space for it or reflecting or just being with it, or maybe it really is changing behaviors, mindsets, beliefs, different things that allow you to change your vibration or how you're engaging in the world.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're just going to be faced with the same
it'll come
challenges.
back. It'll come back until you see it. And I also think this is part of this paradigm shift from a Western pharmaceutically driven healing model. We're so used to just taking a pill and knocking out the symptom. I know that's a very generalized term, and I respect Western medicine. And often I will work with my cancer patients, I will work alongside Western cancer treatments. Reiki is fantastic for mitigating side effects of cancer treatments, just brilliant. So I work with a lot of cancer patients that are going through their treatment on mindset, but also to mitigate. We time it to their chemo cycles. But I think generally, a lot of people come into the rooms with this idea, just fix me. And I'll go, well, I can for probably about 36 hours, but until you take full responsibility for yourself and know that you're generating everything you're experiencing, it's just going to keep cycling around like that dud boyfriend or that experience, or that's the way life works. You know, it'll keep knocking at your awareness until you see it properly and take responsibility for it.
And probably people who are not exposed to this world otherwise, by the time they're coming to see you, this has been going on for a long time, and they've probably tried different things before they actually come in and go, okay, now I'm just ready.
Oh,
Make
yeah.
it all work again.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely see that with the fertility work. So this is another
Mm,
beautiful demographic of people that I work with, which are women who are trying to fall pregnant, and for a variety of different reasons, they just can't. And they will often come and see me when they're on their final last IVF embryo, and so the stakes are super high. But I would like to say that I'm running a 95% hit rate on fertility.
oh
So
my gosh.
I've got this fantastic gallery of the double red lines, not the COVID test, the pregnancy test. And I only got one. I only got one this weekend. And she said, add this
Wow.
to your gallery. You know, I mean, this is another application of Reiki, which you don't hear a lot about, you know, but this ability to open up the energy body and open up the spirit to possibility, which then allows enough sort of space for those possibilities to take root. Um,
Would you be able to share? I don't know if you can put it into words, but for example, in a fertility case, what's happening in that moment that someone comes in, they've been trying, it's not working, and then all of a sudden they're able to become pregnant?
There's a lot of coaching involved. So
Mm,
it's not just the Reiki. I mean, in some ways, the Reiki's almost for me the diagnostic. Um, and it's amazing how many women come in that are fertile. That like there's no actual medical reason why they can't conceive, and also their partners as well. So it's got to be something else. And the Reiki can really reveal that. It's very different for everybody, but some typical examples might be that they hold a fear about the disruption to their life. So they're torn. So they want the experience of motherhood. They want the experience of growing their tribe, but at the same time, they've got a bit of an unconscious thing going on that it's going to completely disrupt their life. A lot of people hold fear around it disrupting their partnership. A lot of people have sort of family of origin fear around childbirth. I
mm,
mean, these are some typical examples, but sadly, I think what that compounds when they've been through a few zillion rounds and $100,000 worth of IVF, where there is so much pressure on them. The other thing that I would say to a really significant and essential shift in perspective that I work with these women is when they've been trying to fall pregnant for a long time, they are single pointed on the moment of conception. And
mm,
they're not at all having a higher, longer view on the initiation of motherhood. And that's the primary thing that I work with them on is how are you looking at this? Because our perspectives dictate the movement of energy.
mm.
And so if they're just single pointed on conception, it's so tight and it requires so much focus if you want to energetically move that a lot of people just don't have that time or that ability. So I work with them on a lot of visualization, on walking down the beach with that little hand in theirs, or 3 o'clock in the morning breastfeeding with a tiny little body lying on their belly. I take them past conception and past birth into visualizing and feeling into the experience of motherhood. That's one example of other things that we do.
So it's like you're clearing out what's really standing in the way.
Yep,
And it's fascinating because most people wouldn't even consider that. They will assume it's physical or something. They won't even consider, oh my God, am I actually terrified to be a mother or something
yep,
else that you're really able to see when you're coming together with them in that
yep,
moment to figure out, okay, what's actually going on here?
yep,
And I love that you bring in the visualization.
yeah,
It's, I mean, this is
yes,
something I do with coaching clients that it's
yep,
just whether it's inner child work or seeing yourself in the future. And I honestly wish I had someone with me every single day just to guide me through the visualizations that I need for the day because it's
yeah.
so powerful to see that and to experience it.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful, and it's gorgeous for a start. But what a well-crafted visualization does is it changes your resonance, and it's the resonance, it's the vibrational resonance, it's the frequency that's generated within you, which attracts or repels different experiences in your life. And fear, for example, has got a huge psychic weight. It's very contracted, even if it's unconscious fear. You're not even aware that you're afraid of it, of the birth or the impact on your partnership or whatever. But fear can really it can really mess up the works. But what's also beautiful too is I'll give this example of this client who sent me the double reds for the gallery on the weekend. Is she saw me 2 weeks prior, and no medical reason, no infertility diagnosed, just has a healthy baby child, but just desperate for another one. It just wasn't happening. And she had a lot of fear, actually, which the Reiki cleared out. Reiki's great for that, just brings fear up and out. It's fantastic. But also what I've been able to perceive is that she was actually pregnant in that session. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and this is the thing that I've over the years I've come to recognize the presence of life in a woman, and even if they're not aware of it yet. And it is the most beautiful feeling, and Reiki facilitates that. So it's only when I've got my hands over their womb, and the way that I describe it to my students is the feeling of it. If I was to describe it in a different way, is that if you live in a northern climate, so you do, so you're in the UK, and you've also lived in more northern climates, right? And it's the time of year where the winter, like now, where the winter is starting to break. It's still quite cold, but there is that moment where the light is a bit different, or you might get sunlight on your face and it's just a little bit warmer, and you go, oh, there's spring. It's like the super early spring feeling. That's what a newly conceived human feels like inside their mother before the mother's aware of it. It's that kind of frequency. It's all frequencies. But you've got to be careful how you relay that, obviously. So what I said to her was, do you know where your cycle's at? And she said, oh, I'm expecting my bleed next week. And I said, I want you to progress from this session as if you're pregnant. Just pretend you're pregnant. Because I didn't want her to load it up with expectations, because that can distort it. But I didn't want her going out and getting smashed on tequila either. So do you know what I mean? So I said, just pretend you're pregnant. Start taking folate, pretend you're pregnant, and see what happens with your cycle. And sure enough, she was pregnant. So beautiful.
Well, I think there's something else you mentioned that's just worth mentioning, especially for someone who's listening and really not familiar with how all of this works, that you have the permission of your clients to see these things and to go deep within it. So you're not walking down the street going, she's pregnant, she's not, this person is, nothing like that. You're really working intentionally with your clients in that way.
Absolutely. The law of permission, I'm huge on this for a number of reasons. It's a very intimate thing, energy healing. Like you are really blending with the auric field of the other person. To some extent, your ability to do that is reliant on them opening the door to you. So that would be the first one. The second thing is that with that permission, there's an openness to perhaps accept and take responsibility for something that they may have been swerving. There's an openness to the possibility of healing. There's an openness that comes with permission, but also particularly within Reiki, you are sending a very powerful and potentially disruptive form of energy into the auric field, which then plays into the mind and the body of the recipient. And you really don't want to be doing that if they're flying down like the freeway in a car, or if they're in a serious presentation at a board meeting or something, So there has to be permission, and certainly for me with my distance clients that I speak to, that I work with every week, we line up the timing. So I'm in Singapore. If they're in the States or Canada, it's early morning for me, and they line up the timing. I tell them to be in a quiet space, very comfortable and very relaxed and uninterrupted. So, because I think part of it is them actually perceiving the energy coming in and where it's working on them. I think permission is absolutely important. And with distance healing, I think they need to be expecting it.
I had this amazing moment receiving a distance session. It was a number of years ago. And I set up a whole beautiful space for myself just to completely relax and be present and, put a yoga mat on the floor with lots of blankets and pillows and candles. And I remember when the session was beginning, I I felt in this sort of half awake, half asleep state. And
Yep.
then I felt two of my cats who had passed away a few years before.
Yep.
I felt them just come in and lie in their positions, excuse me, where they used to lie on me,
Oh,
like
wow.
one on my belly, one next to my right hip. And they
Yeah.
took their positions. And I wasn't fully aware. I said, oh, this is nice, but I wasn't really aware of what was going on. After the session, the healer asked me, like, who were the cats that came
Yeah.
into the session? And I said, what? Because
Yeah.
she knew they weren't still alive. She could tell
Yeah.
that they had just come in and that their energy was really there and protective. But my God, that was so magical.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. Yeah, and it's not uncommon, whether it's an in-person session or a distance session. You obviously were tapping a great healer then, but it's not uncommon for people to feel presences around them, very loving, and certainly in my in-person sessions, a lot of my clients have the sensation that someone very loving is holding their hand.
Hmm.
So I do think that higher vibratory energy, that higher resonance that Reiki is, opens up perception to those kind of things. And when I'm doing distance healing, when I create the connection with the client through the Usui Reiki method, and it's funny because it's called distance healing, but I experience more like a collapsing of consciousness. So I
Hmm.
feel like rather than a bridge opening up and Reiki running and my psychic senses extending across that bridge, I kind of feel like I collapse into where they are. And when I first started, it was a bit of a jump to light speed and a doof, and but it's mellowed now, thank God, because it was a bit giddying. On a good day when I'm well and I'm clear, I can perceive if they've got an animal with them, like a physical animal. I even pick up colours in that room. I know where the natural source of light is. It's not super crystal clear, but I'm definitely, my awareness is with them and they feel it, so a lot of my clients, obviously during lockdowns, we all had to move to distance healing, but a lot of them kept with distance healing, even if they're here in Singapore, because it seems to be more palpable for them. It's
Hmm.
interesting, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, it's such a powerful modality. I have my own experience of Reiki, so I have an innate understanding of really, I mean, innate, not a learned understanding of
Yeah,
how many doors that it really opens.
yep,
So if someone comes into your practice for the first time,
yep.
let's say that they're coming to meet you face to face, what could they expect? Because all of these stories, maybe by now it's like, oh, what do they expect when they come in and they say,
Yeah,
okay, I'm here
okay.
for my Reiki session?
Okay, so what does a typical session look like?
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously I'm very, very friendly Aussie gal, so I make sure before anyone comes into my healing room, I make sure that it's completely energetically cleansed. And I will do that through the common modalities. I will do that usually through sound or through sacred smoke, sage. I've got my own ways of clearing. I hire healing rooms. Different healers use the rooms. So it's very important for me that it's squeaky clean, it's neutral, it's stabilized, and it's clear. I do that in between clients as well, so there's no imprint of energy from the last session. So every client comes into an energetically hygienic space. I will talk with them first, not for very long, and I don't want to hear their life story because I much prefer to trust the intuitive psychic read during the session. But I will ask them why they're here, and I will ask them whether they've experienced Reiki before. And if they haven't, I will give them a heads up on what it feels like. I ask
Mm.
if I have their permission to touch their body. I prefer touch. Some Reiki practitioners don't touch. I like touch. I think there's enormous healing in touch alone. And I think you'd be surprised how many people come in who just need touch, you know. So I ask if I can touch them. I'm already psychically connecting with them. So they may say, "Oh, I get all these blocks in my career, and I've lost my purpose," and that might be why they've come in. But already I'm psychically sensing where that may be coming from. Ask them to lie down on the healing bed. I make sure they're comfortable. I ask them if they want to cover over them or not. Some people they feel safer that way. I tell them that if at any time they feel uncomfortable or they want to share anything, they can, but generally I work in silence. I've got beautiful music. I will guide them in a meditation, much like you did before we started talking. So I will guide them in a meditation which helps them really arrive. So to disconnect from anything that they're bringing in with them and just really arrive there and relax. And then I do a blessing as well. So I'll burn a bit of sage. I will walk around them. I will dedicate the time and the space. I'll dedicate them. I'll dedicate me into their service. And I say all that out loud. And for them, especially if they haven't had it before, they know, okay, we've started, you know. And then I still do typically follow, even though I've been doing it for yonks, the traditional Reiki hand positions. But the difference is I will go down the body and I will ground them, but then I will go back up. And when I go back up, I'm testing my psychic information. And so the Reiki, my sessions are 1 hour. The Reiki will run for 40, 45 minutes. I'll get them back up I seal them in with a sound movement. I've got beautiful sound bowls, and that actually sort of kind of zips them back up, if you like. So they're ready to go back outside into the normal world. I'll get them up. I'll get them a glass of water. That's very important to stay hydrated after Reiki. And then we will unpack what psychic guidance came through for them and also what sensations and things were coming through for them as well. So very often someone will have a predominant colour which seems to flood their mind. There's always a correspondence to that. I had a beautiful example the other day where a woman came in who had a series of just misadventure in her life, you know, with items being lost on a move, just bad luck, what we would call bad luck, right? And what was incredible is when we started the session, in my psychic awareness, this huge angel appeared at the end of the bed in that beautiful lapis lazuli blue. And I don't, I love the idea of angels, but they're not my go-to sort of spirit beings or guides, you know, but I, you know, I was raised a Catholic, so I've grown up with the existence of angels. So I'm cool with the idea of angels, but I couldn't say I have a working relationship with an angel. Anyway, there was Archangel Michael, and well, an impression at least of Archangel Michael. Whether it was the actual big AAM, that's to be debated. But anyway, it was very, very prevalent, and a lot of other information came through. But when I got her up, got her a glass of water, and I started to relay what I perceived, I said, "You've got an affinity with angels," and she was really, you know, and I was so sure of it. I just said that. I didn't ask her, and I said, "And in particular, you've been praying a lot to Archangel Michael," and she said, "Whoa!" She said, "How do you know?" And I said, "Because it's working." Because the frequency of that pattern of Archangel Michael is very, very apparent in your auric field. And that was enough for her to feel confident and victorious and to go back to the injustices and to correct them, because she came in to me saying, "I feel like I need to walk away, but it doesn't feel right." There was a lot of other stuff that came out in the session, but that's the sort of relaying. There can be coaching in that. It can be if someone's got sort of tummy issues, very often I will taste psychically what their body needs. So I will taste like a metallic taste. It's called clairgustance, the psychic sense. I'll know they're really low on minerals, or iron or magnesium. And sure enough, they will start to take supplements, and then whatever their issue is will go. So the psychic information is quite good, especially if you're
Mm.
dealing with a physical habit change. But anyway, we talk about that, and that's recorded. That's sent to them afterwards, and with any tools, any guided practice, any journaling prompts, anything that I think can help them related to that inquiry. So they've got a little bit of homework to go away with.
Also, I know you do the healing sessions, and we won't go into all of the teaching that you do now, but you also help people to become healers.
I
I
do.
know that I have taken your online course on intuitive healing,
Yep,
and you partner the intuitive healing, then with an in-person attunement for people who want to go that route or take
that's
that
right.
path.
Yep,
Um, and that, I find it really remarkable. I guess you already know this, but Reiki is not the same for everyone. People practice it in very
yep,
different ways, but your particular flavor of Reiki brings all of this to the table. It brings the psychic information, it brings the coaching, the healing, it brings these elements of mediumship that you were discussing earlier.
yep.
And that is powerful healing.
Yeah, well, I think it's holistic and sustained healing.
Mm,
And I'm more interested in that. Like, my preference would be that my repeat clients get to a point where they just never have to come back. Like a proper transformative healing experience where they're game changers. That's what I'm interested in. And I think that's sort of what gets facilitated, because that is my area of intrigue and curiosity and constant, you know, discovery. But I'm not disparaging at all of people who seek Reiki to relax. It's equally as effective. And
a client of mine is starting her own practice of sleep Reiki. So she's
nice.
trialing it now for people who really struggle to go to sleep, that
Yep.
they're able to get in touch with her and join a collective sleep Reiki session. She said it helps her to fall asleep. She's
Yep.
practicing, I don't know, with her mom and some close friends at the moment, but
That's a great
um
idea. I love that idea. But there are scientific studies, there are empirical
mm,
studies that show the shift in brainwave activity once Reiki starts moving through the system. And it does move. That's why sometimes it's referred to as a facilitated meditation, because
mm.
it augments the brainwaves in similar ways to slipping quite rapidly into deep meditative states. And that's what you need to shift your brainwaves to move into your sleep cycle, right? So that makes complete sense to me. What a gorgeous offering.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to me because I've always woven the Reiki that I do into my coaching practice. So I
Yep.
don't see people specifically for Reiki, but it's everywhere. It's in the podcast, it's in the coaching. I'm infusing,
Yeah.
as you call them, the formulas.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
symbols are all over the place. But
Yeah.
it's really, yeah.
That's equally as effective, I think,
Mm,
like, and I can see that because I also invoke the symbols as part of my preparation of my space. And so often people will walk into the door of the healing room and just start crying, and they're
mm.
confused. They're like, I don't know why I'm crying. I'm a very happy person. I said, no, it's nothing bad, but you're in a healing space, which has got very, very active energy in it, and your system knows it, and it's already starting to release what needs to come out today.
So for everyone who's listening now and going, okay, I want to know more, how can people get in touch with you? What can they get in touch with you for?
Okay, so obviously they can get in touch for a private session. I'm running a really long lead time though, so you have to wait about 3 or 4 months to get in to
Mhm.
see me. But I do have over 100 healers now in my community that have trained with me, that have been attuned by me, and I've got a directory, and they're really solid healers, and they're also taken my training and then evolved it and synergized it with other stuff that they're doing. So we've got a lot of Reiki coaches in there. We've got a lot of Reiki homeopaths in there. There are Reiki sound healers in there. So that's on my directory, and only the people listed on the directory are at practitioner level. and they're also actively seeing clients. I've got a beautiful membership which I launched last year called spiritedlivingwithdani.com, and this explores all sorts of beautiful spiritual content in a community. We do quests together. There are little mini talks. There are tons of online meditations, meditation guidance. I've got masterclasses of amazing people coming in and running different masterclasses. And that's a global community. So, and there's live coaching as well with me every month. Across different time zones as well. And so that's sort of probably my most recent offering, but it's growing and it's beautiful. So that enables spirited living with lots of great content and inspiration. You can tap my podcast, you can read my book, you can send me an email, whatever you like.
So I'm going to just say for everyone listening that definitely experiencing some of the healing through Dani's network of healers is an incredibly valuable way to begin. I am a member of your spirited living community, so I can say wholeheartedly that this is absolutely worth it for anyone who's curious, wants to go deeper, and do that in a community of others who are also seeking that deeper meaning and connection. And just to be able to share some additional resources, are there any other teachers or authors or books that you would recommend for someone who just wants to learn a bit more about Reiki or get a different understanding of what it is or how to engage?
Well, look, there's a lot. And, I've got a few blog posts on my website. I write about it in my blogs. You can just tap those. And I write about it in my book, Spirited, as well. There's Elaine Grundy. She was the Reiki master here in Singapore. She's back in the UK. She wrote a book called Reiki Pure and Simple, and that's required reading on my course. It breaks it right down. She's a brilliant Reiki practitioner. She's a great teacher, but she breaks it right down. It's a very small, easy book. So I recommend that. I get all my students to read that as part of my course material. And I just think that the general move for anyone who's going, wow, this sounds amazing, I want to get my spirit game on, is to start to just carve out a little bit of time every day to give to your spirit, whether that's meditating or yoga or walking somewhere gorgeous outside, and just allowing yourself to start to sense non-obvious energy. And when you step towards it, it steps towards you. And that would be a start to is a little bit of meditation or meditative practice in whatever form that takes every day. Just like you eat every day, you've got to feed your spirit every day as well.
Brilliant. I have taken a lot of your time, very gratefully. Thank you so, so, so much for, not just sharing generously, but really your storytelling capacity is incredible. I really appreciate, just the passion that you have for what you do, the way that you share it, the way that you open people's eyes to what's really possible. It's so beautiful. I am so, so grateful to have you here.
Oh, Amanda, it's been an absolute pleasure, and the feeling is very mutual. I just absolutely love what you create and what you're putting out. I'm always looking for what you're doing next as well. So I'm really grateful that you gave me a slot on Don't Step on the Bluebells, because I think this is. It's going to go large. It's going large, So I'm happy I'm in the lineup. But it's always a pleasure, honey. It's great to talk to you.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to this episode of Don't Step on the Bluebells. You'll find all of the information you need about how to get in touch with Dani and her book and the community and everything in the show notes. And thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. To dive deeper into today's conversation, make sure to visit www.don'tsteponthebluebells.com and grab your exclusive pod sheet. It's packed with valuable takeaways that will enrich your listening experience. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.